Hi there. Welcome to Seaside Quilting Tutorials. My name is Terry. This is week 3 of our 2023 Seaside Quilt Along. So we're working on block 3 of our quilt, this one here. And we've already done 1, and we've done 2, and now we're on 3. And as we go, you'll start to see a pattern for how the sashing is getting attached. It looks difficult when you're looking at the picture, but as we go through, you'll see how it's really not, they're not all that hard at all. They're actually pretty easy. Today is probably the easiest block. I didn't arrange them exactly by difficulty. I tried to arrange them to what I felt, actually all of us, Barb, Mary, and I, collaborated on how the blocks would flow together to make a nice flowing quilt top. So some blocks even got deleted and replaced with other ones, just so it would look prettier, that one block wouldn't stand out maybe more than the other and pull your eye in that direction. But between the 3 of us, I feel like we came up with a really nice quilt pattern. And each week, our cutting instructions get posted to our group, Seaside Quilting, on Facebook. So please join us over there if you haven't already. And we have our business page, Seaside Quilting Supplies, LLC, on Facebook. That's where we post our fabrics. We post our live, which is every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And often we have special sales and whatnot. And sometimes in our group, we have sales that aren't listed anywhere else. So it's really nice to be a part of our group. Now you'll notice as I create things and do tutorials, sometimes the fabrics that I'm using, we don't have in stock anymore. And it's just unavoidable. It's that whole time constraint. We don't live near each other. We both live in Virginia, but she ships me fabric, and sometimes by the time she's cut it, shipped it to me, I've done the project and gotten it out to you, those fabrics may already been sold. And that's happened with a few of our projects. So I'd like to encourage you to find your own, fabrics to go together. So what I did on our group was I posted this in several different colorations. One more natural colors, one in purples, one in teals. I can't remember the others right offhand. But you can use any fabrics together for this quilt. So granted, we're in spring and a lot of us are thinking spring. I was, so that's why I went with the teals. Actually, my whole room was covered with fabrics. When I started this, I had blues together, I had falls together, Christmas together, teals, purples, pinks, you name it. I had everything strewn all over on all the tables, taking pictures of them, trying to see what more popped to my eye. There's actually, the blues were my first choice, and I may actually make this in the blues when I'm done filming this for everybody, just because it's so striking, the blues that I picked out. They're a cobalt combination with some black, and it's just striking. But then when I put these teals together at first, I liked them, but there just wasn't something that wasn't catching right. And then all of a sudden I looked over to the side and I saw what I'm using for my sashing, the pattern that I'm using for there of a batik. When I put that with the teals, it was just like, boom, it just popped. And I knew, and we all knew, that was the choice to pick for this quilt. Although I may go back and do those blues, because those blues are just stunning, and I'm a blue person. I love blues. I love teals too, but I love colors of all colors. I just can't deny it. I'm a color person. So anyways, let's get started with block 3. Remember, we're using a scant 1/4 inch. So, and also I'm moving my stitches down to 2.0, so I have smaller stitches. They just hold the quilt together a lot better. Less shifting in the fabric when I'm sewing. And the scant 1/4 inch rectifies the thread that you're using to sew it. It rectifies opening it up and pressing it. If you haven't seen my video on the scant 1/4 inch, it's over in our tips area playlist. Check that out. It's really worth watching. You can see the difference in just setting your machine to a 1/4 inch and actually using a scant 1/4 inch when you're piecing a quilt together. And sometimes it doesn't matter if you're sewing a bunch of blocks together and they're all going to be in the 1/4 inch and you're not following an exact pattern. It's not going to matter, because as long as you're stitching them all the same way, they're going to come out the same. So, but when you're following a pattern, quite often you're going by exacting measurements, and so using the scant 1/4 inch is going to bring you to what you need to be at. Just my preference. Years ago, I didn't even care about it. I wasn't even one who pinned their stuff together. I didn't understand, why would you waste your time when they're just tiny pieces that you're putting together. But because feed dogs on the bottom feed at a different rate than the top fabric, because it's the presser foot holding them down, the feed dogs feed at a little bit of a different rate. Not a huge rate, but enough so that if you don't pin your pieces together or clip them together, that bottom fabric, when you get to the end, you'll have more top fabric than bottom fabric. Sometimes it's just a little bit, but it's enough to set off your measurements. So I've learned over the years to not be that rebel and to pin and clip my stuff together. And it also helps your seams to be more accurate. And a lot of us, some of us are beginners. I was a beginner once upon a time, way back in the day. And I had to learn, and we're all learning. I'm still learning things. I don't think I'll ever stop learning. So, you know, we have a lot of tips and tutorials that are helping. And in the future, I'm going to have some more on binding and other tips and tricks to help you in the quilting world. So, all right, let's move the camera and we'll get going. Now, I apologize when I have to adjust the camera. I'm the only camera person. I'm all by myself. I don't have a studio of people working for me to do my filming. So I'm all on my own. Okay, so this week it's really wonderful. You have 3 colors of fabric, your background fabric that you picked out for your blocks, and 2 of your colors, whichever ones you want to use. And we're making 4 half square triangles. So we have 2 of the background fabric and 1 of each of your colors. And I'm cutting them at 6 inches. So 6 inches square. Okay, so we have that. I'm just going to, my patterns always have a bunch of notes on them in case I have to adjust sizes. I put everything into my software. My software spits it out one way, and then when I go to sew it, because I like to test my blocks, I'm like, oh, that's not working. That's not going to work for everybody, and I'll adjust the sizes. So, yeah, my notes. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do, and I don't have to worry with the batiks. The batiks are nice because back or front, they're the same. But with this, it's actually a tonal white, which I'm not sure how well is showing up in the camera, but it's almost like a grungy look on the white, in white on white. So I do have to always check and make sure that I have the right sides and I'm not working on the wrong side by mistake. So I flip these up so I remember. You're going to put whatever one of your colors on one of the whites, right side to right side, and the same with the other one. And just line them up really well so that they're on top of each other evenly. Now these are going to get trimmed down after we're done. Okay. So, I have my ruler here somewhere. I'm filming many of these ahead of time so that when the day comes for them to release, they'll pop out to you automatically, and I'll post the cutting instructions in our group. I'm giving you the measurements here as we go along, so you don't necessarily need to download them because you will have all your measurements for what you need to cut and how many of each that you need to cut. But I like to have the cutting charts so that when I'm at my cutting table, it's easier for me to just go along and cut my fabric. So you're going to do the same thing that we did last week. You're going to draw your line down through the center of your fabric. Remember, I'm using a 1/4 inch foot with the metal flange piece, the guide piece on the side. I use that guide piece to go down my center line, and it automatically does my 1/4 inch on each side. If you don't have that set up, just take your ruler. This is the creative grids that I've told you about before. Find your 1/4 inch marking, lay that down on that line, make sure that it's all the way even on your line, and you can draw your other line on the side. And then again, you'll lay it so that it's lined up with that line that you drew the first time, and draw a 1/4 inch on the other side. So it ends up looking like this. I'm hoping that that shows up. Excuse me. So you have your center line, your 1/4 inch, and your 1/4 inch on each side of it. That center line is our cutting line for our half square triangles. And I'm going to mark my center on this one. Now I'm using a Frixion pen. It's heat removable. You can use chalk. You can use a water-soluble pen. You can use the air disappearing pens, whatever your preference is. I'm using this because it shows up a little bit more on the camera when I'm drawing. I quite often use chalk when I'm doing things on my own because I can just brush the chalk off. Okay, so let's go ahead and piece these together. Remember to keep your hands on both sides of the fabric as you're feeding it through so you have a nice, straight, steady line. Now I just chain piece them through and then snip off my leader piece, and I'll separate them, and then I do the other side. This block really does not take long at all to make. Things are flying everywhere. Okay, so I have both of my sides stitched. And I'm just going to cut these in half on my center line that I made. You can use scissors or you can use a ruler and your rotary cutter. So now we have 2 half square triangles of that coloring. And 2 of this one. So we can go ahead and move that stuff out of the way. And I'm just going to press these to the dark side. So first I set my stitches with my iron. Remember, don't iron back and forth. Just press and press. Then I open them up. I run my fingernails up against that stitching. You can use that purple thing or a ruler if you don't want to mess up your nails. My nails will start to look gunkier as I'm working more outside because we're in spring and I'll be outside gardening. So putting nail polish on will just get all messed up anyway. So I don't bother this time of the year. I'm going to put my quilter's clapper on there for a second to flatten out my seam a little more. We'll get each one of these done. And then we'll trim them down. Get them squared up. Just one more to do. It's been beautiful here in Virginia. We had a very mild winter. So our trees have been budding early and there's a lot of extra allergens out there. That's the only downside, but I do love the weather here. Okay, so now we've got those pressed. So remember, I told you that you need to use a ruler that has your 45-degree lines. This one has black and white. So depending on what fabric you're using, you have a coloring that will work on your fabric. You're going to line that 45-degree line up on that center seam. And this is really hard, probably really hard to get in the camera, but I did do a separate tutorial just on half square triangles. And I'm going to slide my ruler down. Oh, let me see. So a correction on that. These are going to be, let me see. I think 5, yeah, 5.5. squared up. Sorry, I think I told you 5 7/8 squared up. I can't remember if I said it or not, but we're squaring these up to 5.5 inches. This probably takes me the longest because I'm very particular. I like to double check everything is sitting where I need it to sit before I cut anything. There isn't very much that's going to come off. Just little slivers on the edge, on the end, sides are coming off. I'm going to flip it around and double check. Need to flip my ruler around. And then I'm checking to make sure that that 45 is sitting right on my seam. And that my piece is sitting, each side now that I've trimmed them is sitting at the 5.5 inches. And then I'll do my little trim. There we go. So I'm going to do each one of those real quick like. Or somewhat quick like. And this gets your dog ears off at the same time, so you don't need to bother with snipping those. They'll be coming off as you're squaring it up. Just 2 more to go. This is probably the longest part of it, is getting it squared up to size. Which doesn't really take long at all, because there isn't much coming off. See, just itty bitty pieces. And just remember to double check before you cut, because once you cut, you can't fix it. You have to make a new one. Okay, just one more, and then we'll get these put together. I got little straggler pieces all over the place. I have to stop each time I film a block to clean up the room and get it back to normal, because usually while making these blocks I make a mess. I have pencils and pens and everything everywhere. Okay, we are almost done. I've been making a lot of half square triangles lately. There's a lot of them in my quilts. Okay, so that's our 4 pieces. I can put that out of the way. So now we take our pieces. You're going to follow your pattern This will go that way. This one is going this way. So we get almost a little bit of like a windmill look. And that one goes that way. And I just double check with my pattern to make sure that all my pieces are going in the right direction. So just take your picture and just, I hold it up. I make sure, okay, all my pieces are going in the right direction that I need them to go in. So now I have only 2 rows this week that we need to put together. So I'm going to flip this one over so that we have right side to right side. And I'm going to sew a seam right down here. I'll fold this one over to here. And my seam will be sewed this way. Now you have to be careful that you don't get these miscombobulated. Now I do sew on, let me see, this side so that I can start up here and then come down to this point. If I start up here, sometimes this will catch because it will be thicker. Sometimes it will catch on the needle. So I just flip it over. Just be careful not to confuse yourself. And I am going to put a clip down on this end to make sure that it stays together as I sew my seam. Okay, and so I'm going to do the same with this one. I'm going to put a clip down here. Make sure that this is all lined up nice and even everywhere. And then I'm going to start sewing down here again. Okay, so when we open them up, they're following our design. I just have to flip this one back over and everything is back the way that it needs to be. So let's press these. Now when you press them, you're going to want your back center seam to be going in opposite directions. So the top one, I'm going to have it go, I'm going to press it so that it goes towards the right. And the bottom one, I'm going to press so it goes towards the left. Just finger press that open. Put my clapper on there for a second. So I have that one going towards the left, and then this seam is going to go towards the right. Scoot that out of the way. And then once again, whoops. That's why it's always good to look at your picture, because I had that upside down. And you can see, check your points right here and see how your points are looking. And it's looking pretty good. So now I'm just going to flip this down to the bottom. So I have right sides to right sides. I'm going to scoot over a little bit. So you'll be able to see what I'm doing. Now I put a clip here. I'm going to put one down in this corner so that I can see that it's going to hold those pieces together where I want them. This helps so that the fabric's not shifting while I'm sewing. And I'm also going to put one down in this corner to hold this corner in place. This way I know that everything as I'm sewing it is going to stay aligned and not shift. So now this center part, I'm going to want to bring these up. So your two seams are going to lock together. And I just wiggle my fingers until I can feel that they're pressed up against each other. I'm also checking to make sure that my fabric is equal on both sides to each other. Not one is higher than the other. And then I'm going to take a pin and right where I can see that the top of this point is going to be, I'm going to put my pin straight through that point. And then I'm going to open it up and I'm checking to see, did my pin go through right at the top of the points? And it didn't. So I'm going to take my pin out and I'm going to move it up just a little bit because I can see that I didn't go in right where I needed to. So then I open it up and I double check to see that I'm at the top of my point. And I adjusted it because it was sitting off just a tad. I want that pin to be on the top of the point here and on the top of the point here. And then keeping it straight, I make sure that my pin stays pinned straight so that the fabric's not twisted one way or the other. Then I line up my edge over here. And because I see that this back fabric is shifting a little bit, I'm going to put an extra clip there. And I'm going to do the same on this side because I can see. Actually, I'm going to take that pin out because I can see that it's partly where I pinned it. And just shift that center down a little bit. And I'll clip this to keep this in place. Because I want to try to make sure that my point comes out. And looks like a nice point. Okay, once again, I'm going to open that up and I'm going to double check where my pin went through, and it did not go through to where I wanted it. So I can see this is right where, because I can see where my stitching is crossing. The stitching's this way and that way. I want to get my pin in right where that stitching is crossing, which brings me right to the top of my point right here. And now I'm trying to get it into the top of that back one. And then I'm just double checking to make sure that these are up against each other and my pin goes in straight and keeps both the back and the front even and flush with each other. And sometimes it takes me a couple times of pinning and shifting the fabric to make sure that I'm getting it where I need it to be. Now, as I get towards that seam, it's thicker. So I'm going to slow down. And I'm going to get my needle so it's almost to that pin. And I'm going to go slow doing it because I'm going through thicker seams. And I'm making sure that my seam here stays flat as it goes underneath. And I want that needle to get almost to that pin without hitting my pin. And I'm just going to go slow so that my needle doesn't shift. If you don't go slow through a thicker seam, the needle can shift to one side or the other and shift your fabric. And then you won't get a nice point. So I ease my pin out. And I'm going to stay slow until I'm completely over that seam, allowing that needle to have time to get through that seam. If I go fast, the needle's going to shift. Okay, let's see how that point came out. Throwing my scissors at myself. And hopefully it came out really nice. Okay, so let's press that. It's going to be a little bit thick either way that I press this. So I'm going to set my stitches first, but I'm also going to put that quilter's clapper right on that center seam and press down a little bit. If I have a thick seam when I go to long arm something, I will leave my quilter's clapper on it overnight. Usually it's flat enough and I don't have a problem, but if I still have a problem, I have a rubber mallet that I use. And I just hammer it a little bit and it flattens it. Oh, and it looks like that came out real nice. I'll see once I get my quilter's clapper on there how my points came out. Okay. Now, like I said, tonight I will press this and then I'll just walk away and I leave my quilter's clapper on it overnight. Tomorrow, that seam, that center will be nice and flat. And I'm just going to go over it one more time. Press it one more time because I want you to be able to see the seam. And one of my seams over here, see how it went crooked? I'm just going to make sure that I press that down because I don't want my seams to be shifted and folded out of place. So I just fix it with my quilter's clapper. And let's take a look at that, at the points. Pretty good. They all came together pretty nice into the center. So I'm pretty happy with that. I will, once again, like I said, I'll press this, put a lot of heat onto it, and then I'll leave that quilter's clapper on this block overnight. And then tomorrow, this will be, you won't even recognize it. It will just be so flat. That's one of the reasons why I love love, love the Quilter's Clapper. Okay, so now we just need to do our sashing. And this block is done. And we will be complete for this week. So I take my diagram and I can see, let me get this iron out of the way. And I can see that my block's going to go over in this corner. My 3 strips that I've already pre-sewn together. Once again, you just sew your 3 strips together. You're going to sew these 3 strips to this block. Your long piece will go up here. Remember, you have your seam between. Your long piece is your center piece. So once these are sewn together, you will sew this on to there. And then your next sashing, which you did your 2 small pieces and then attach them to your wide long piece sashing. And those get sewn afterward up to there. So those are your 3 sections. You just sew those all 3 together. And once again, you will have your completed 16.5 unfinished block. So this one's 10.5 unfinished. Then you add your sashings and they come out to 16.5 unfinished. So that's it for this week. I've got to run. I've got to get cleaned up and get ready for the next filming for block 4 for next week. So I will see you next Friday for block 4. I'm so excited. This is looking really pretty. And you'll start to see as you're putting your blocks together, setting them side by side, how they're starting to come together and look really nice. So I hope that you're enjoying this tutorial. My name is Terry. This has been Seaside Quilting Tutorials. Please take a moment, if this is the first time that you're watching us, to subscribe. And right next to the subscribe is a little bell. If you click on that bell, you can set notifications to all. And then each time a new block comes out for our 2023 Seaside Quilt-Along, you'll get a notification, or anytime that a tip or another tutorial comes up, you'll get a notification to let you know. So that's it for this week. I'll see you next Friday. Happy sewing.